All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Awesome. Today, we're tackling something you wanted to explore, the ISO Net Zero Standard, IWA 42.2022 to be precise.
Ah, yes. The guideline for, well, pretty much every organization trying to figure out this whole net zero thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, these standard documents, let's be honest, they can be a bit on the dry side,
A little bit. Yeah.
but trust me, this one's crucial if we're going to understand how companies are, actually trying to deal with their greenhouse gas emissions. And I know you wanted to get a grip on this standard, maybe for work, maybe just because you're curious. Either way, we're going to unpack it, pull out the juicy bits. We'll even look at what companies are doing, like in the real world, to actually hit net zero. But first, let's make sure we're all on the same page here. When we say net zero, what are we talking about?
It's a term you hear everywhere these days, right?
Okay.
But at its core, it's about balance. Think of it like a scale. You've got the greenhouse gases a company's releasing into the atmosphere on one side, and on the other side, the amount they're actively removing. The goal is for those two sides to, well, to balance out.
So it's not just about reducing emissions. It's about what actively pulling existing carbon out of the atmosphere, too.
Exactly. And that's where things get interesting, because then you have to think about the types of emissions, right? You've probably heard of scope 1, 2, and 3.
Vaguely. Remind me.
Scope 1, that's your most direct emissions. The stuff coming from a company's own operations, like if they're burning fuel for energy.
Okay.
Scope 2, that's indirect. It's the emissions from the energy they buy. So like electricity from a power grid that uses, say, coal.
Gotcha.
And then there's Scope 3.
Which is where it gets complicated, I bet.
Oh, absolutely. Scope 3 is all the other indirect emissions. Think of it as their entire value chain, right? So emissions from the materials they use, transporting goods, even how their products are used and disposed of by, us, consumers. It's often a huge each chunk of a company's footprint.
So that whole lifecycle perspective thing the standard talks about, right? Looking at the entire journey of a product or a service.
Yes. And Scope 3 is often the trickiest to actually measure, to manage, and to reduce. Think about it. If a company just focuses on Scope 1 and 2, they're missing this huge piece.
Okay, I'm starting to see why this standard matters. It's not just about tweaking a few things here and there. It's about this whole system, yeah. But how do companies actually put this into practice? Like, how do they actually get to net zero?
Well, the ISO standard lays out a kind of roadmap. It outlines these core elements, starting with, context and leadership. A company really needs to understand its impact, have commitment from the top. But let's jump to the actual steps companies are taking. Yeah.
Let's get to the good stuff.
One of the big ones is energy efficiency. Upgrading to energy efficient lighting, HVAC systems, those kinds of things, but also optimizing production processes to use less energy, even encouraging employees to, be mindful, save energy in their daily work.
So those little things like turning off lights actually do matter.
Every little bit helps, right? But it's bigger than just individual actions. Companies are investing a lot in renewable energy, things like solar and wind. Some are even exploring geothermal energy.
Right, because if you're using energy that doesn't produce emissions to begin with, that's a huge step toward net zero now.
It's fundamental, really. And then we get to carbon offsetting, which is essentially investing in projects that, well, they remove carbon from the atmosphere to kind of compensate for emissions you can't completely eliminate.
Like planting trees. I feel like I'm seeing tree planting everywhere these days.
That's a classic example. But you also have projects focused on restoring wetlands or capturing methane from, say, landfills. The standard is really big on making sure these offset projects are legit, that they actually do what they promise, not just a company writing a check and calling it a day.
So there's a whole verification process to ensure these offsets are the real deal.
Absolutely. Transparency and accountability are key when it comes to offsetting. There are different frameworks for measuring and reporting emissions data, and having these consistent standards, it's crucial to make sure companies are being, well, honest and accurate.
Okay, yeah, I'm starting to see how complex this is. But before we get too deep in the weeds, can we see how all of this plays out in the real world? Like, what are companies actually doing?
Sure. You provided us with some great case studies from companies like Unilever, Microsoft, even IKEA and Google. Each one is tackling this a little differently, but they all showcase the principles of the standard in action.
Perfect. Let's dive into those.
Let's start with Unilever. They've set this ambitious goal of literally having, the greenhouse gas emissions from their products by 2030. That's a big deal, especially for a company with such a huge range of products. They're hitting this from multiple angles, but one area where they've made some serious progress is energy efficiency in their manufacturing plants.
So they're walking the walk,
Yeah.
not just talking about it.
Oh, they're definitely putting in the work. And it's not just focused on their own operations. They're working with their suppliers to reduce emissions across the entire supply chain, encouraging them to switch to renewable energy, adopt more sustainable practices, track their data more carefully.
That makes sense. If their suppliers are generating emissions, it ultimately adds to Unilever's footprint. It's about taking responsibility for the entire life cycle, right?
Exactly, seeing that bigger picture. Now, if you think Unilever is ambitious, check out Microsoft. They've pledged to go beyond net zero and actually become carbon negative by 2030.
Carbon negative. So they're aiming to remove more carbon from the atmosphere than they emit.
That's the goal. They're tackling this on several fronts, but it starts with their own operations. They're working to use 100% renewable energy for all their facilities, including those data centers, which are notorious energy hogs.
Wow, that's a massive undertaking. What about the emissions they just can't eliminate completely? How are they addressing those?
That's where things like carbon removal technologies come in. They've put a lot of resources into direct air capture tech, literally machines designed to suck carbon dioxide right out of the air. Fairly new technology, but the potential is huge.
So it's like a giant air purifier, but for the whole planet.
In a way, yeah. And they're not stopping there. They've created a climate innovation fund to support the development of even more solutions for reducing and removing carbon.
Okay, so they're putting their money where their mouth is. That's good to see. It's one thing to make a pledge, but another to actually invest in making it happen.
You're telling me. Now, we've been talking about these huge companies, but how does this standard apply to, say, other industries? Let's look at IKEA. They're well known for their sustainability efforts already. They've actually set an even more ambitious goal than net zero. They want to become climate positive by 2030.
Hold on. Climate positive, what does that even mean?
It means they're not just aiming to, neutralize their impact. They want to actually have a positive impact on the planet. One of their main strategies is this laser focus on sustainable materials.
Like using wood from those sustainably managed forests? I know they're big on that.
That's a big part of it, yep. But they're also exploring alternatives like recycled plastic. They're even experimenting with, well, some pretty innovative stuff, like packaging made from mushrooms.
Mushroom packaging, that's wild. Really thinking outside the box there.
Right. And it's not just materials. IKEA is designing their products for circularity, meaning they can be easily taken apart and recycled at the end of their life.
That closing the loop idea we talked about, yeah.
Yeah.
Keeping materials in use longer, reducing the need to extract new resources.
Exactly. They're even going a step further, offering furniture repair and take-back programs, encouraging customers to keep their stuff for longer.
Okay, so IKEA is serious about this, not just trying to minimize their impact, but actually trying to make things better.
They really are. It shows that sustainability can be core to a successful business, even in retail. Now, how about we switch gears? Look at another giant, Google.
Google, huh? I know they've been into renewable energy for a while now.
Oh, yeah. They were one of the first major companies to commit to 100% renewable energy. They hit that target back in 2017, actually.
So they've been running on completely renewable energy for years. Impressive.
They have, but they're not stopping there. Their new goal is even bolder, 247 carbon-free energy for all their operations by 2030.
2047 carbon-free energy. Break that down for me.
It means they want to match their electricity use with carbon-free sources like every hour of every day. Huge challenge because things like solar and wind, they're intermittent. They're not always available when you need them.
Right. The sun's not always shining. The wind's not always blowing. So how are they going to make that happen?
It'll take a combo of tech and strategy. They're investing a lot in energy storage, demand management systems, more advanced grid technologies. They're even using AI and machine learning to develop new solutions for, managing energy and integrating renewables better.
So basically, they're trying to make renewable energy more reliable, more available when they need it. That's pretty cool.
It is. And the best part, they're not keeping this to themselves. They're sharing it with other companies, organizations, helping everyone move toward a carbon-free future faster.
I like that a lot. So we've seen how some companies are making real progress, taking concrete steps towards net zero, investing in new technologies, and even aiming to go beyond simply neutralizing their impact. But and this has been on my mind, is it all really working? I mean, we hear a lot about greenwashing these days, companies making big claims but not really backing them up with action.
Oh, that's a very valid concern. And the ISO standard addresses this directly. One of its key principles is third-party verification.
So you're talking about having an independent auditor come in,
Yeah.
basically, and make sure the companies are actually doing what they're claiming.
Exactly. That verification process is super important to ensure these net zero claims are credible. And it goes beyond just verifying the emissions data. It also involves looking at the whole net zero strategy, making sure companies aren't just picking the easy wins or, doing some creative accounting to make things look better than they are.
So it's about checking the whole picture, making sure they're not cutting corners. But how about the way companies report their emissions data? Is there like a standard format for that?
There are a few well-known frameworks like the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. The ISO standard doesn't say you have to use a specific one, but it really pushes for using a consistent, transparent methodology. It's about making sure everyone is using the same language, measuring things the same way.
Okay, yeah, the value of this standard is becoming really clear. It's not just about setting goals. It's about having this really solid framework for action. It's about transparency, holding companies accountable. This has been super insightful. I feel like I have a much better grasp on how the ISO net zero standard is being used in the real world. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I have a question. We've talked a lot about companies, what they're doing, but what about us? Like us, the consumers. What role do we play in this whole net zero equation?
That is a great question, something that the standard doesn't directly address, but we should definitely think about it. After all, as consumers, we have a lot of influence, right?
Right. Companies are ultimately responding to what we, the consumers, want.
Exactly. If we demand more sustainable products and services, companies will have to deliver. We need to be informed consumers asking the right questions about products, where they come from, how they're made, what their environmental impact is. We need to vote with our wallets, and support companies that are aligned with our values.
And make conscious choices in our own lives, too. Reducing our energy use, choosing more sustainable ways to get around, being mindful of what we buy and how we get rid of it.
Absolutely. Recognizing that we all have a part to play, whether it's running a big company or just making those everyday choices, our actions add up.
Love that. It's a reminder that we're all in this together. We're not done yet, though. We still have more to uncover on this topic.
In part two, we'll be back with even more interesting case studies, and we'll explore some of the specific technologies and strategies companies are using to cut down those emissions.
Until then, thanks for listening.
See you in part two.
Welcome back. Ready to dig into more real-world examples? I love seeing how companies are putting these net zero concepts into action. Super inspiring, you know?
We've got some fascinating case studies lined up. How about we shift gears a bit from those massive corporations to a company that's, well, pretty famous for their strong environmental commitment, Patagonia.
Patagonia, the outdoor clothing company. Yeah, I've always really admired their dedication to sustainability.
Exactly. And their goal is even more ambitious than just net zero. They're aiming for complete carbon neutrality across their whole business. That includes their supply chain, and they're aiming for 2025. A tough one for any company, but especially one in the apparel industry. Those supply chains are notoriously complex and sprawling, to say the least.
So how are they approaching this? Are they just planting a forest the size of a small country or something?
It's a bit more nuanced than that, though. Tree planting is definitely part of the mix. Patagonia is taking this multifaceted approach, really emphasizing sustainable materials. They were like pioneers in using recycled materials, organic cotton, always looking for those innovative new materials with a smaller environmental footprint.
I actually have a Patagonia jacket made from recycled plastic bottles. It's pretty great.
There you go, see. But they go beyond just the materials themselves. They're working really hard to reduce energy use in their own operations, and they're pushing their suppliers to do the same.
So it's about that whole ecosystem they work within, influencing things beyond their own walls.
Exactly. And they even engage their customers directly, encouraging them to repair their clothes, not just throw them out, and offering programs to recycle old Patagonia gear, trying to shift those consumer behaviors toward a more circular model.
Love that. Extending the life of products,
Yeah.
keeping them out of landfills. So important.
Absolutely. And what I really like about Patagonia is their transparency, I guess you could say. They're open about the challenges they're facing, areas where they still need to improve. That honesty, that willingness to be held accountable, it really resonates with people.
Patagonia is setting a pretty high bar. Okay, let's move to another company, one operating in a totally different space. Siemens. They're massive, involved in so many sectors, it's kind of hard to even grasp. How are they approaching net zero?
Siemens is another great example of this really comprehensive approach to sustainability. They've pledged to be carbon neutral in their own operations by 2030. Considering how big and complex their business is, that's a big deal.
No kidding. Where are they focusing their efforts? What are they doing?
One major area is, yep, you guessed it, energy efficiency. Upgrading their facilities with all those energy-saving technologies and making their production processes leaner, less energy intensive.
Makes sense. As a manufacturing company, I imagine those are areas where they have a lot of control over their emissions.
For sure. But they're going beyond that, too, working with their suppliers to reduce emissions throughout their whole value chain and making big investments in renewable energy.
Are we talking solar panels on every factory roof?
They're doing that in some cases, yep. But they're also buying renewable energy from outside providers, even investing in those large-scale renewable energy projects like wind farms.
So they're not just switching their energy sources, they're actually helping the entire renewable energy market grow, which benefits everyone. Cool.
It's a win-win, really, and they're even taking it a step further. Siemens is also using their expertise in digitalization, I guess you could say, to create solutions that actually help other companies reduce their emissions, too. Think software platforms that can help optimize energy use in buildings and factories.
So they're not just reducing their own footprint, they're giving others the tools to do the same.
Precisely. Aiming to drive that systemic change, I guess you could call it, towards a more sustainable future.
All right, I'm noticing a trend here. These companies are not just meeting the minimum, they're being ambitious, pushing the boundaries. Seems like the sustainability movement is gaining some serious momentum, especially in the corporate world. But I'm curious, are there any common roadblocks, things that these companies all seem to struggle with as they work towards net zero?
That's a great question. And despite all the progress, there definitely are hurdles. One of the biggest is data. Getting accurate and consistent data across all their operations, and especially from their supply chains, it can be a real headache.
Because, like they say, you can't manage what you can't measure.
Exactly. And a lot of these companies, they have these complex global supply chains trying to get a clear picture of emissions from all those different sources. It's a nightmare.
So it's about collaborating with their suppliers. Then, right, helping them get better at data collection and reporting.
Huge part of the solution, building those relationships, encouraging transparency across that whole value chain, it's essential.
Yeah.
And then there's the ongoing challenge of Scope 3 emissions, those indirect emissions from sources they don't directly control.
We talked about those earlier. Those are the tough
Yeah,
ones.
they really are, because it's about influencing other people's behavior, right?
Yeah.
From suppliers to consumers. It takes collaboration, innovation, and sometimes, honestly, a bit of a leap of faith.
So it's about making sustainable practices, well, more appealing and easier to adopt.
You got it. And we can't forget about the financial hurdle. Many of these sustainability initiatives require pretty significant upfront investments.
Yeah, things like upgrading equipment, switching to renewable energy, putting whole new processes in place. That can't be cheap.
It's a hefty price tag for sure. But more and more companies are realizing these investments pay off over time. Lower energy costs, improved efficiency, a stronger brand reputation. These are all real, tangible benefits.
So it's about changing the mindset a bit, seeing sustainability not as a cost, but as a strategic investment in the future.
Exactly. And there's growing evidence that companies with strong sustainability practices actually do better financially, too. Investors are paying attention to those environmental, social, and governance factors, ESG.
So sustainability isn't just the right thing to do, it's also becoming just good business sense.
It really is. And that shift, it's really positive. It means sustainability is becoming more mainstream, getting baked into the core of how businesses work.
Okay, I'm feeling pretty optimistic about all of this, but before we get too carried away, let's look at a company that's, well, known for innovation, but not always for sustainability. BMW. What are they doing to become more sustainable?
BMW. You say BMW, most people think high-performance vehicles, right? But they've actually made a pretty bold commitment to sustainability, aiming for complete climate neutrality across their whole value chain by 2050.
Whoa, that's a huge goal for a car company. Are they just like going all in on electric vehicles then?
Electric vehicles are a big part of the plan for sure, but it's much broader than that. They're looking at every single part of their operations, even beyond the factory floor.
So it's about how the cars are made, powered, even how they're disposed of at the end of their life.
Exactly. They're thinking about that whole life cycle. One of their big initiatives is switching all their production facilities to renewable energy.
So what, solar panels everywhere?
There are definitely solar panels involved, yeah. But they're also buying renewable energy from other sources, even investing in their own wind farms to generate clean electricity.
Wow, they're not messing around. But even if their factories are running on renewables, what about the cars themselves? Electric vehicles are great, but they still require energy to manufacture and to charge, right?
You're right, and BMW knows that. That's why they're also focused on making their whole production process more efficient, using less energy and fewer resources to build each vehicle. They're also really focused on sustainable sourcing, especially using more recycled materials.
So reducing the impact at every stage, from the materials to the manufacturing to the eventual end of life, the whole picture.
Precisely. And they're even exploring some really innovative ways to make the vehicles themselves even more sustainable, like new battery technologies that are more efficient, easier to recycle.
It sounds like they're really trying to push the limits.
They are, and they're thinking about charging too, trying to make electric vehicle charging more sustainable, promoting those renewable energy sources, and even developing smart charging systems that optimize energy use.
So they're thinking about the whole ecosystem around their vehicles, not just the car itself. That's a pretty holistic approach.
It is. And they're investing a lot in R&D, researching and developing new technologies to reduce emissions even further.
Okay, one last example, and this one I'm especially interested in, Google. They've been at the forefront of, well, pretty much every tech innovation for years. But what about their sustainability efforts? What are they doing there?
Google has actually been a leader in sustainability in the tech world for a while now. They've been carbon neutral since 2007, which is pretty impressive. And their current goal, to be completely carbon-free by 2030, eliminating their whole carbon footprint.
Wow, that's incredibly ambitious. How are they going to do that? Their data centers must be a big focus, I'd imagine.
Data centers are definitely a big part of it, yeah. But their approach is way broader than that. They've got a whole range of initiatives to reduce emissions across all their operations, from the energy they use to how they design their products, even how their offices are run. It's pretty comprehensive.
A very holistic approach, sounds like.
It is. They're putting a lot of effort into reducing energy consumption in those data centers, which, as you know, are notorious energy hogs. But they've implemented all sorts of energy efficiency measures, advanced cooling systems, optimizing their servers to use less power. A lot of clever stuff.
Those data centers are the backbone of so many of their services. Even small efficiency improvements must make a big difference.
Huge difference. But it's not just about efficiency. They're also transitioning those data centers to 100% renewable energy. They've been signing these power purchase agreements with renewable energy providers all over the world.
So they're putting their money where their mouth is, directly supporting that growth of the renewable energy market.
I like it. Absolutely. And they're pushing things even further, exploring ways to make the data centers themselves more sustainable, using AI to optimize energy use, even testing new cooling technologies that use less water.
So it's about constant innovation, looking for new solutions.
It is. And their efforts aren't just limited to data centers. They're also working to reduce emissions from their offices, employee travel, even the manufacturing of their products. They're trying to account for that entire carbon footprint.
It's not just about internal changes, though, right? They have a massive platform. They can really advocate for change on a broader scale.
You're absolutely right. They're using their influence to support policies that promote clean energy and a more sustainable future. And they're trying to empower others to reduce their emissions, too, developing tools and resources that help businesses and even individuals track their carbon footprint and make more sustainable choices.
It's great to see a company like Google using their size and their reach to actually make a difference in the world.
I agree. It shows that sustainability really can be a core part of a successful business in the tech world. It's not just some side project. It's integral to everything they do.
Okay, we've explored a lot here, from consumer goods to manufacturing to these tech giants. It seems pretty clear that there's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to reaching net zero.
That's true. Every company is different with its own specific challenges and circumstances, but some common themes are definitely emerging.
What are some of the key takeaways? What are we seeing across all these different companies?
Well, first and foremost, companies have to take this holistic approach to sustainability. It's not just about reducing emissions from one specific source. It's about looking at that whole life cycle,
Hmm.
from the products to their operations, and finding ways to minimize that impact at every stage.
No more quick fixes. It's about the big picture.
Exactly. And transparency and accountability are huge. Consumers and investors, they want to know how companies are doing, so companies need to be open about their goals, their progress, and even the challenges they're facing.
So transparency builds trust, shows that they're taking it seriously.
It does. And finally, innovation is key. We can't solve this problem with the same old approaches, right?
We need new solutions, creative solutions.
Absolutely. And all the companies we've discussed today are doing that in their own way, investing in research and development, experimenting with new technologies, collaborating with others to find solutions that can speed up the transition to a more sustainable future.
Yeah, that commitment is really encouraging to see. It gives me hope.
It should. It suggests we're moving in the right direction. The path to net zero is long, but it's an opportunity to build a better world, a more sustainable world.
That's a great way to think about it. Not just about mitigating damage, but creating something better.
Exactly. And the companies that embrace that, those are the ones that are going to thrive.
Okay, this has been a truly fascinating look into this whole world of net zero. I'm feeling pretty inspired by all the innovation we're seeing, but we're not quite done yet. In part 3, we're going to take a closer look at some of the specific technologies and strategies that companies are using to actually reduce their emissions.
We'll get down into the nuts and bolts of what's driving this whole sustainability revolution, the tools, the techniques.
Can't wait. Until then, thanks for listening.
See you in part 3.
Okay, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the ISO Net Zero standard. We've talked big picture. We've seen how some real companies are putting these ideas into practice.
Yeah.
And I want to get into the nitty-gritty, the tools, the technologies that are actually helping companies shrink those carbon footprints.
This is where things get really exciting. There's so much innovation happening, especially in energy efficiency. Companies are getting seriously clever about how they use energy in your buildings and the stuff they make. It's
So
amazing.
we're talking more than just like energy efficient light bulbs and fancy thermostats, right?
Way beyond that. Think like sophisticated energy management systems. They monitor energy use constantly in real time and find areas for improvement. We're even seeing AI now, systems that can automatically adjust lighting, temperature, all based on how many people are in the building, the weather outside. It's pretty cool.
So it's like having this super smart building manager, but their only goal is to save energy.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just buildings. Companies are designing their products to be more efficient from the start. More efficient appliances, vehicles designed to be aerodynamic, use less fuel, all these innovations to use less energy throughout a product's entire life.
Makes sense. If you can build that efficiency in from day one, you're reducing the impact for years.
Absolutely. And then, of course, there's the whole world of renewable energy, which is just becoming more and more accessible and affordable
Mm-hmm.
for everyone, really.
Yeah, we've talked about those solar panels, buying renewable energy from the utility companies,
Hmm.
but is there more to it? Is it going beyond that?
It totally is. Companies are investing in big renewable projects now, building their own wind farms,
Huh.
solar farms. We're even seeing geothermal and tidal power becoming more viable. There's a whole buffet of options out there, and it's getting bigger all the time.
I love that. But even with all this renewable energy, there's still that problem of, intermittency. The wind's not always blowing, the sun's not always shining. How are companies working around that?
That's where energy storage comes in. We're seeing these amazing advancements in battery tech, making it possible to store more and more renewable energy to use when we need it.
So it's like a giant backup battery for your company, but it's charged up with clean energy.
Exactly. And there are other options too, like pumped hydro storage, which uses gravity to store energy, and compressed air storage. Pretty clever stuff.
It's incredible what engineers can come up with, right?
It is. And these storage solutions, they're only going to become more important as we rely more and more on those variable renewable sources. They smooth out the bumps, when the sun dips or the wind dies down.
Okay, so we've got ways to use energy more efficiently, ways to generate cleaner energy. But what about those emissions that are just really hard to get rid of? Any solutions for those?
There are. This is where it gets really futuristic. Carbon capture and storage, or CCS, is getting a lot of attention.
I've heard of that. That's where you capture the emissions before they get into the atmosphere, right?
Yep. You capture the CO2 from industrial processes, power plants, and then move it to a storage site, usually deep underground.
So like a giant vacuum cleaner for CO2.
I like that analogy. It's still a pretty new technology, but the potential is huge, especially for those heavy industries that are hard to electrify, like cement and steel.
It's like we're developing the tools to undo some of the damage. This is pretty amazing. Any other technologies that have you excited? Things on the horizon that we should be watching?
Oh, for sure. Carbon removal technologies are getting a lot of buzz. Those focus on actively removing CO2 that's already in the atmosphere.
So instead of just preventing new emissions, we're talking about taking out what's already there. That's wild.
Right. Direct air capture is one way to do it, using chemical processes to essentially scrub the CO2 from the air. And then there are natural solutions like planting trees, reforestation projects. Those can help soak up that existing CO2.
It's almost like we could rewind the clock a bit on some of the climate impacts. That's pretty powerful.
It is, but important to remember these technologies are still in their early days. There are hurdles, both in terms of the technology itself and the cost. It's not a quick fix, unfortunately.
I hear that, but definitely something to watch. Okay, so much cool tech, but I want to come back to something we talked about before, the circular economy. It feels like that plays a really key role in all of this.
It absolutely does. The circular economy is getting a lot of attention these days, and rightfully so.
Remind us again, what's the core idea behind the circular economy?
It's about moving away from that old way of doing things, the take, make, waste model. Instead, we want a more circular model where we keep resources in use for as long as possible.
So designing products that can be repaired, reused, recycled, finding ways to use waste as a resource for new products, that kind of thing.
You got it. It's a win-win-win situation, really. Less waste, we conserve resources, and it can have a big impact on climate change. Keeping materials in use means we don't need to extract new resources and manufacture new stuff, both of which use a ton of energy.
So the circular economy isn't just good for the planet, it's also good for business because it's more efficient.
Exactly. And it can spark innovation, create new jobs. It's got so much potential.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. Energy efficiency, renewable energy, carbon capture, this circular economy idea. It feels like there's some real momentum building here, finding solutions to climate change. But I gotta ask, are there any downsides to all this tech? New technologies, sometimes they have unexpected consequences, right?
That's a really important point. No technology is perfect. We have to think about the possible risks and trade-offs. For example, some carbon capture tech uses a lot of energy to run. That could negate some of the benefit, those emission reductions, and some renewable energy sources, like those big solar farms, they can have an impact on land use, biodiversity. It's complicated.
So it's not as simple as just throwing technology at the problem. We have to be smart about it, think about those bigger impacts.
Totally agree. It's about systems thinking. Everything's connected, and there are often trade-offs to consider. We got to be aware of that.
Okay, this deep dive into the ISO net zero standard and all these amazing technologies, it's been, wow, eye-opening. I have a much better sense of the challenges, but also, wow, the incredible innovation that's happening right now. It's inspiring, honestly.
It's been a great conversation. I think the biggest takeaway for me is there's no magic bullet for climate change, you know?
It's going to take all of us working together, businesses, governments, individuals, all of us.
Absolutely. Collaboration, innovation, and a willingness to try new things, to think differently.
And a bit of optimism doesn't hurt.
Can't forget optimism. This is a huge challenge, but it's also a huge opportunity to build a better world, a more sustainable world for us and for, the generations to come.
Love that. It's not just about fixing what's broken.
Yeah.
It's about building something better. Okay, this has been a fantastic journey. Thanks for joining me in this deep dive. It's given me a lot to think about, and I'm feeling good about the future.
It's been my pleasure. And remember, this is just the beginning. A lot of work ahead, but I really believe together we can create a brighter, more sustainable world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. To all our listeners out there, thanks for being with us on this deep dive. Hope you learned some stuff, felt inspired. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep pushing for that better world. Until next time.
See you on the next deep dive.